day, new goals, let's own it. And in this episode of Leaders Create Leaders, we're gonna go and meet up with the original boss babe, a millennial leading strategist for brands all over the world, Alex Wolf. She took the unconventional approach. She actually thought that college was a scam, and her father inspired her to really dive into entrepreneurship. But she's gonna go into what it takes to go from 0 to 10 as an entrepreneur, and then how she went and built one of the leading communities for feminists, for female entrepreneurs, over 500,000 on Instagram and growing. She's working with brands all over the world. How she did it, we're gonna get into the untold story of none other than Alex Wolf. Thank you. Alex Wolf is with us. I am excited because you are not just one of the leading millennial strategists and experts right now for branding for millennials out there, but you're like the original boss babe that kind of, I really feel, created this movement right now for just like a lot of these young, talented, feminine women that are becoming, bosses. And me growing up with two sisters, both very feminine but hustlers and like making it. My sister Cynthia is she actually was like all cosmetology growing up and like into that, but she's like one of the hardest working women I've ever known. And I just think it's really cool to see how you stood really like when Instagram really started to get going, like you were the first to really come out with this movement. So like, I don't know, talk to me. I want to get back into your whole backstory, but first, maybe before that, like, what was the inspiration for you for when you first started Boss Babe?
Yeah, so I am like a typical millennial when it comes to didn't want to do the traditional route. I felt like the system of going to college and getting a job was just, it wasn't adding up. I even remember like Googling, is college a scam? Because everyone in my life was telling me to go, and I just felt like all this like money that I'm investing in this education, is it really gonna pay off? Because all the people I knew who were graduating were having a hard time finding jobs, were in mountains of debt. And so I was like, wait, before I like really invest in that, what else is an option? And so I did a lot of research, YouTube University was what I call it, just going online and just figuring out what are the options, what can I do? And so I started off with, my first business was like selling candles online. And that was my first like, okay, what's the, figuring out the startup costs and what margins were. And that flopped. And then I moved on to, I lost 50 pounds and I was like, okay, I'll do health. And then I got involved in health coaching, and then I got bored of that. And so it took a few like attempts before I started to feel more confident, and I got an understanding of what was possible. And just, you got to get your feet wet. Like the way I explain it is there's like levels to entrepreneurship.
Yeah,
and level 0 is when you don't know anything.
Yeah.
And I say that the only way to get out of level 0 to level 1 is by doing it yourself. And I think there are a lot of like miracle products out there that are like, we'll get you out, and this book, this course, this, that. And I'm like, no, it takes you making those first investments that you don't know will pay off. It takes you going to networking events and talking. And so that was my level 0. Once I started to get more confidence, and during that process, I learned a lot about social media. I've always been on the computer. My dad, he's been in tech for a long time, so I had a computer before everyone else. So I was on MySpace before everyone else and all that. And it sort of gave me an edge, and I started doing social media consulting for entrepreneurs. And it ended up that I was working with a lot of older entrepreneurs, and they were paying me like, at the time, which was a lot, was like $100 an hour to like set up Twitter accounts and stuff. And I was like, yeah, like I can do this. And during that time, it was great, but I wanted more. I wanted to work with women, and I started to see so many women who sort of had a similar story to me, where, they didn't want to do the traditional thing, and a lot of like, I think the millennial generation, we don't want to have to sacrifice our identity for our work ethic. So I would go to these meetings with these older entrepreneurs and dress however I wanted, whatever was the fashion. And I was, sometimes insecure because as a feminine woman, if you have confidence about how you dress, people take it a certain kind of way.
Yeah.
And so I saw that more and more of us started to care less and wanted space to just say our professionalism doesn't necessarily reflect, like if someone wants to wear their hair pink, that doesn't mean they can't get the job done. And so that I think was the culture in which I started Boss Babe, because I felt like a trend was coming where women weren't going to be sacrificing their femininity for their professionalism. And got on Instagram, and it was really a confessional at first, very meme-like little icons and graphics, and it spread like crazy and went viral.
Like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, like 500,000 people.
Yeah, and I will have to say, the first day I got 100 followers, the second day I got 200 followers, by the fifth day I had 500 followers, and I remember thinking, I can't believe there are 500 people who are relating to this, right? And eventually I was like, this is a thing. And I think often when we build brands, we underestimate how the little nuances that we think make us unique are actually very common. So it's sort of a humbling experience, because at first I was like, oh, I thought it was just me. But then I'm like, this is an underlying thing that's happening in our culture. And I was just someone who brought that out. And I think there are a lot of things that are happening in our culture that we have an opportunity to bring out and give a voice to, and then people attract themselves to that, because a lot of us feel it, but a lot of us are not brave enough to say it, and sometimes we wait for the leader or the brand to come in and do that. So I would say it was around then. And yeah, I mean, I've seen Boss Babe tattoos, I've seen the word everywhere, and it's now, I think, just a part of the culture, and I'm very grateful that, that's what it has become.
For sure. So talk to me about like what it felt like to build that, now build your community now. Go from being that person that felt alone, tapping into that, building this brand, being like, woo, how the heck, I got 500 people following me, to then like, wow, this is serious. This is becoming a real relevant brand now, and people are actually looking for this sense of like, real next step of network and community.
Great. I mean, that's what we do this for. That's the entrepreneurship ride. There's highs and there's lows, and that's just what it is. And so that was part of the high in this journey, and definitely felt like hard work paid off. But I will say, like, it never ends. Like, I'm not like, okay, done. Like, I'm like,
no, that's when it all kind of really feels like it starts.
I'm like, exactly. I'm like, okay, now it's just getting started. And so I learned a lot about myself. I think I changed a lot. Like, the person who I was when I started it is completely different than who I am today. And so, that's partly why it's operationalized. I have a great team running it, and now I'm working on other stuff. But, that was a big deal. That was a big deal, working on something for so long, and then saying like, uh-oh, I'm not as passionate. What happens now, you know? Am I allowed to move forward? Am I allowed to move on? And so that's the joy of being an entrepreneur. You learn about yourself more than, in my experience, any school has done or anything else has done. It just makes you dig into yourself. You're tapping into all your deepest fears and all your deepest joys. You're making money while doing it and losing money while doing it. It's just a very intense experience, and I think it gives you a very fulfilling. It's a very fulfilling journey, exactly. But you got to have peace with the downs, because a lot of people are like, they get seduced by the highs and they just go into it for the highs, and I'm like, no. Oh no. Yeah.
So how do you deal with what does balance look like for you? Like, how do you deal with the lifestyle? Because that's a question I get a lot.
Yeah. I don't believe in the whole balance thing.
Agreed.
I don't believe in that. I don't think that's relevant to your happiness or success. I think you need to have boundaries. Like, you need to know when it's like, I need to go to sleep. I need to hang out with my family. I need to work on this thing all day, right? But like the balance thing, that's just too tricky for me. That's too intimidating. I'm like, No.
I always say that I don't think there is such thing as balance, but especially when you want to be an entrepreneur.
Right.
But you need to be cognizant of the things that matter in your life.
Right.
And I think, for me, like it is very similar, like, family, making sure I get my sleep. Like I need I need my sleep. It's so important. And just little things, even like walking the dog, like going for a run, like
enjoying
working
life,
out, enjoying life, traveling. Like you gotta balance it.
You forget so quickly why you got involved in entrepreneurship. Like we all get involved in entrepreneurship because we want more freedom and flexibility over our lives, and we want to be happy. But like that gets forgotten on like day 2. Like you're already forgetting that the whole point of this is to enjoy life more.
Yeah.
So that's something that you have to constantly remember. Like, bro, I'm doing this because I want to be happy and I want to have free time. Let me make sure I'm building my business so it's making me happy and giving me free time, because it can quickly
turn. Because you need
turn.
that. You do need to make sure that you do learn how to make. We talk about like when purpose meets profit, and like you need to know how to actually generate a profit. You need to understand the business end, because it can be. That's where I think the line is drawn, where people think entrepreneurship is glorified and it's fun and it's a freedom and you get to do all these things, and it's like, yeah, it's real fun until you realize like your bank account is like nearly zero, and you need to learn how to act, like how are you gonna.
I call it, that's instapreneurship. Instapreneurship is
I
all
like
good.
that new term,
it's
instapreneurship.
All good, it's all the highs. That's not entrepreneurship.
Right.
And then I also talk about like wantapreneurs. There's a lot of people who want to be entrepreneurs. Yeah. So that's not entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is it's the good and the bad.
Yes.
You got to take both if you want that bread.
Yeah, I love it. So I relate to Alex so much because, obviously I thought college was a scam too. I did a whole documentary called College Conspiracy on it years ago, and I'll never forget dropping out of college that first semester during finals. It was one of the scariest things in my entire life, but entrepreneurship saved me, and it saved her too. Luckily, she had her father to inspire her. But she talks about going from 0 to 1 as an entrepreneur, and just know that wherever you start is not where you're gonna finish. For her, it was selling candles, but now she's one of the leading millennial strategists for brands all over the world. So just know it's about taking initiative, getting started, doing the research, and for her, she calls it YouTube University. For me, that's why I created Founders, to give those entrepreneurs the ability to learn and get started. And one thing that she talked about in building her community, Boss Babe, to 500,000 and growing, was the fact that it started with one thought that she actually was nervous about talking about, because she thought maybe it was something that she was going through personal. And when she opened up about it, she realized it was something common amongst a whole generation of other women that wanted to be feminine in the workplace and still be looked at as professional. So something that you may be facing that you're afraid to talk about publicly, maybe that one thing that's gonna make you authentic, relatable, and create a wave that's gonna be the spark to your community and your tribe. And now, because of Alex, she has a massive community called Boss Babe. So talk to me, you now took what you've learned throughout these years with Boss Babe and working with other entrepreneurs, consulting with them, to become one of the leading millennial strategists when it comes to branding. Talk to me about what is your expertise now, and what made you kind of now go and pursue being an expert with that? And then are you working with companies? Are you working with more entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I'm working more with companies and brands who are looking to connect with millennials. I think there's room for honesty when it comes to that, because I think a lot of brands are afraid to just admit that they're having issues connecting with millennials, and it's not as simple as slapping an emoji on something or putting a hashtag. One thing I think that needs to be acknowledged is millennials are growing up. This conversation is a great example. So usually people hear millennial and they think teenager with the phone. And I'm here to say, well, actually we're adults and we're making more money and we want to have more stimulating conversations. We are getting to the age now where our grandparents are passing away. We're having children, and these life transitions are forcing us to become more mature and start asking bigger questions about life. So what I'm focusing on right now is this concept of resonating. And I think that when a brand, or even just an artist, right, prioritizes the idea of resonating, it helps craft an impactful message that will influence, spread, and engage with the culture. And when we're dealing with right now our society, our attention spans are deteriorating.
Oh yeah.
Because there's just too much.
Overconsumption.
You go on Twitter, you know, everyone knows what it is. The scroll is endless and it's always refreshing, and we're dealing with this intense pressure of FOMO. Like that's partly what the millennial dilemma is about. We want to be everywhere at the same time.
Yeah.
That's why we move here and live out of Airbnbs, and I'm traveling to this country for this, because we're fearing that if we don't, we're going to miss out on the main thing. And so brands, I think, need to start respecting and understanding that there's a new adult, there's a new American adult, and it's not what it used to be. Before, the American adult was the person who got the car payment and got the mortgage and had the kids. And we, sort of what we were saying earlier, we don't really trust that system.
No.
You know, we're dealing with the highest rate of divorced parents in American history. A lot of us, we have beef with that sort of old school adult culture because it didn't serve us the way we wanted. And so we're willing to come up with our own.
New rules.
Even if we don't know what we're doing, we're like, look, that did not work, so we're gonna do something else. And so basically, I'm helping brands come up with resonating messages. And when I say resonate, I mean coming up with something that's going to make you stop when you're scrolling. So there's this intense scroll, there's all this FOMO happening. The only way to stand out, I don't believe it's by pumping up an ad with a bunch of money and throwing it out there. Ads are important, but before you even design the ad, come up with a message that you know will resonate. Because in my experience, in what I've built and what I've been working on, when you craft a message that can't be ignored, it will have a natural effect where it will spread, and people will say, I have to see this.
And then people will engage.
Exactly. And it creates a loyalty.
Yeah.
And it actually saves companies money, because all that money they would be spending throwing ads at us, which we also have a negative bias towards traditional advertisements, we now build a different relationship. And so I'm seeing an epidemic where some of the biggest, most respected brands are having a hard time connecting with the millennial audience, because there's just too much of a trail for the actual project by the time it gets launched. Whatever message they're trying to prolate gets lost. And that's the other thing, are the trends and the speed of content right now. Brands can't afford to have that lag. And so what I'm doing is I'm coming in and saying, look, how can we recraft this message so it sticks out in general and gets our consumers it positions the consumers to equip them with, to market the product or whatever the brand for us. I think that's what gave me so much success in what I've done, and I'm excited to work with other brands on helping them do that.
So what would you recommend what were some steps that you would take? I mean, I know you work with brands and companies, as well as, you know, for people out there, that I coined this term called social currency, where I do believe that more now than ever, you as an individual, you are like a media platform, and you should be taking your personal brand serious as well, so that you can work with these brands. What would be some practical steps that you would take for someone like yourself, that if it was starting all over again, and you wanted to start to build yourself as an expert, and yourself as a brand yourself, what do you think that would be some steps that you can take?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to see how much the Instagram has become sort of a resume.
Yeah, true.
And even my time here in New York, someone was trying to get me into a club, and before, not like a nightclub, but like a house club.
Yeah.
And it was what's her Instagram? And I'm like, what? You know?
Yeah.
But thankfully I have a platform and my Instagram's on fleek, so I'm good. But I was just wow, this is really, like you're saying, the social currency is a thing. I almost am kind of afraid that it's a thing, but I'm willing to admit that it's a thing. And I'm starting to really see that in our culture. What are some steps? I think when it comes to branding, when it comes to branding yourself, right, just the whole concept is it gets weird, because I think we feel like we need to add things on to us and say, okay, so if my brand is, I'm the health girl, so I'm gonna do this and my photos are gonna do this. You're treading in dangerous territory, because I think what a real brand is actually, it's not adding anything on, it's taking things away. So what I mean by that is I get the best retention and engagement with my audience when I am when I can find the streamline between my exact thoughts and feelings and my platform. So it's whenever I start to say, oh, well, my brand is this, so I have to filter it out and say it through this kind of way. Doing that, I think, really messes up the flow and the connection. And even the biggest influencers, right? And I just wrote a post about how people should stop trying to be influencers. And the reason why I said trying is because most influencers didn't try.
Right.
They were just on the platform, usually at a time before the platform's peak, were consistent in giving content, and had very little, like they had no intentions of becoming influencers.
So I know a lot of entrepreneurs that are watching right now, like they have a brand. They may not be at the level of the Coca-Cola yet,
right,
but they're at the level where they got some, you know, they got some money to spend. They definitely are at the point now where they feel good about their product. They have a little bit momentum,
right,
but they really want to take it to the next level and really get millennials to create some loyalty with them and pay attention to their mission. What would you say to some of those brands?
I would say have a story. Have a story, a brand story, and people get really lost with that because it sounds more complicated than what it is, but it's just a matter of figuring out, why did you start this brand? What made you start it, right? Asking that, or answering that question in a very real and honest way, and then figuring out the themes of what's behind that story. So was it because you were resisting against a cultural norm? Was it because you wanted to create a space for people? Was it because, and then using those themes to create the brand story, which you can tell over and over again in different ways. Because whatever the brand story is going to have to be the same story that the people who interact with the brand has. And so going from there. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, creating it, you have to be relatable.
You have to have a story. What's the point?
You have to resonate.
Why am I wearing your jeans? Why am I wearing this lipstick? Why am I signing up to be a part of this club? I think it's about, you know, when it comes to identity, that's what brands reaffirm. Brands say, you're this kind of person, and we're helping you be this kind of person through our brand. And so for people building brands, you have to figure out where your customer is aspiring, or what your customer is aspiring to be, and then have your brand affirm that.
So I hope you guys love this episode. I mean, this last part about understanding the new adult, the new age millennial, and the way that we think, I think is so important. Whether you're just a small brand or a billion-dollar company, understanding that your story is what really matters. Your why is, at the end of the day, what's gonna help shape what resonates with the millennial audience. And the fact that, you know, if you want to be an influencer, most influencers don't try to be an influencer. They just are. And the fact that, like, if you're trying, you most likely are not going to be one. But the more that you're able to really, truly just recognize who you really are on the inside and just be yourself, be authentically you. Talk about the things that you fear most. Be extremely vulnerable. That's what's going to get you to relate. And then as a brand, you know, the number one thing that you want to do is figure out what your customer is aspiring to be, and then affirm that idea. And if you're able to do that, you will then see them stop scrolling and maybe buy in to your company. So I hope you guys love this episode of Alex Wolf. I love bringing you people that you may not have ever known, and then bringing you those people and bringing you their full story. And hopefully you took some lessons from this. Comment below what you loved about this story from Alex Wolf, what you loved about this episode. If there's other people that you want to see on the series, as always, I appreciate you guys so much for being a part of this movement. It's more than just a show. So until next episode, guys, I hope to see you on the inside of Founders, and I love y'all. It's your boy G, even in the rain.